Give her 1 bullet. Chief Wade Brant said it loud, the way he said everything, so the whole equipment bay turned to look. He was a big man, and he used all of it, shoulders filling the doorway, voice filling the rest. He held up a single round of .50 caliber between 2 fingers like a coin he was about to make disappear. Holloway says she only needs 1. 1 round, gentlemen. She's going to win the whole war with a single piece of brass. He grinned at the men around him. What do we even need the rest of you for? The bay laughed. It was the kind of laughter that isn't really about the joke. It was a sound 7 men make to tell the 8th man he is right, and to tell the woman in the corner she is alone. A couple of the younger SEALs slapped the bench. One repeated the punchline to himself, savoring it. Nora Holloway did not look up. She was seated on an ammo crate with her rifle's bolt carrier in her lap and a rag working oil into the lugs, and she kept working it. Her hands did not stop. Her jaw did not tighten. Her eyes stayed flat and level on the steel in her fingers, tracking the rotation, checking the seat. She breathed in for 4 counts and out for 4, the way she always did, and the only thing she did with the laughter was let it pass through her, like wind through a fence. She did not say a word, because she already knew something they didn't. She knew that before the week was out, 3 of the men laughing in that bay would owe her their lives, and that the loudest one, the one holding the bullet up like a magic trick, would never again be able to look at a single round of .50 caliber without going very, very quiet. Stay with me on this one, because there is a moment coming you do not want to miss. A moment where that same loud man has to key a radio with his hands shaking and say her name like it's the last rope holding him over a drop. And I want you to hear how the whole channel goes silent when he does. If a story like this is why you're here, do me a favor. Subscribe, drop the name of your city in the comments so I know where you're listening from, and stay all the way to the end. I want to see how far this one travels. Now, let me take you back. 2 weeks earlier, the high desert was a furnace with a wind in it. Outpost Kestrel sat on a shelf above a valley the locals called the Throat, a long, narrow gut of dead ground that funneled everything, heat, dust, sound, trouble, into one place. The whole base smelled of diesel and hot canvas and the mineral dust that gets into your teeth and stays. At night, the temperature fell off a cliff, and the stars came down so close they felt like a threat. Nora Holloway came up that gravel road in the back of a supply truck with a rifle case longer than she was tall, and almost nobody bothered to read her file. If they had, they would have read that she held a marksmanship record at the sniper course that still stood. A record no man on Kestrel had come within 400 meters of. They would have read that she'd cross-trained as a medic, that she could pack a sucking chest wound in the dark by feel. They would have read about a grandfather named Silas Holloway, who'd raised her in flat, hard wheat country, who put a rifle in her hands at 7 and taught her that shooting was not about the trigger at all. Stillness first, he used to say, his voice slow as the morning, his big hand flat on her shoulder. Get still enough, and the shot takes itself. You don't make the shot, girl. You get out of its way. The fueler saw her first. Corporal Estes, a freckled kid from somewhere with a lot of corn, was topping off the generators when she stopped to ask where to stow her gear. While he pointed, she set the case down, popped the latches out of habit, and ran a check. Bolt, optic. The little turret adjustments she touched the way other people touch a rosary. She did it in maybe 9 seconds, eyes half closed, and snapped the case shut. Estes watched her hands the way you watch a card dealer in a casino, knowing something fast and skilled just happened in front of you, not knowing what. You're the new spotter?" he asked. She said, "Shooter." He nodded like that meant the same thing. It didn't. He'd think about her hands again, later, when it mattered, and he'd understand it then. The dismissals came in different shapes, which is how you knew they meant it. On the range 2 days in, Brandt ran the platoon through long guns out to 800 meters, calling hits, talking the whole time. When Holloway took the line, he announced the distance like a carnival barker and told the men to watch the medic miss. She put 5 rounds into a group you could cover with a playing card at 900. The bay went quiet for half a second. Then Brandt said, "Lucky string," and moved on, and the moment closed over like water. Because a man like that does not change his mind, he chooses, and he had chosen, a different shape, the mission board. When the long-range Overwatch slot for the Valley patrols went up, her name wasn't on it. She found out from the schedule, not from a person. When she asked the operations chief, he didn't even look up. "We've got that covered," he said, meaning Brandt, meaning anyone but her, and the institution closed its one open door with a soft administrative click that was somehow worse than any insult shouted in a bay. It wasn't only her. The young corporal they'd attached to her as a partner, Yara Soto, got it too. Got it the way the eager get it, with a pat on the head. In a briefing, Soto once corrected a range estimate the platoon sergeant had wrong by 60 meters. She was right. He looked at her like she'd belched at a funeral and said, "We'll let the grown-ups handle the math, Soto." And the room chuckled, and Yara's ears went red. And Holloway, 2 seats down, did not smile, but something behind her eyes went soft and furious at once. That night, the 2 of them ended up at the makeshift range behind the motor pool, with a laser rangefinder and a notebook, and the whole indifferent valley laid out below them in moonlight. They didn't talk about any of it. They built a range card instead. Holloway walked her through the throat foot by foot, the fold of dead ground at 1200, the burned truck at 1900 that made a perfect reference, the far ridge they called the Anvil, a wall of rock 2.5 miles off, where the wind split into 3 currents running 3 directions at 3 heights. "You'll never shoot that far," Yara said, half laughing. Holloway wrote the wind notes down anyway, in her small square hand, and said, "You write down everything. Then you never have to guess." That was the bond. Not grievance. 2 people good at a hard thing, getting better at it together in the dark, while everyone who mattered slept. It came on a Tuesday, the way these things do, in the flat middle of an ordinary morning. The Valley Patrol was routine. 2 vehicles, 8 of Brandt's men. A meet and greet at a village at the far end of the throat. Holloway was not on it. She was up on the Kestrel shelf cleaning gear when the first sound reached her, and the sound was wrong. Not the crack thump of a single shot, a wall of it. The valley below had opened up all at once, from 3 sides, in a coordinated roar that meant this was not bad luck. This was an ambush that somebody had spent weeks building. A rocket left a gray scar across the air. The lead vehicle in the throat slewed sideways and stopped meant dead. And dead meant men on foot in the open, in the worst killing ground in the province. The radio net dissolved into the particular chaos of men being hit. Contact, contact, pinned. We are pinned. Gun on the high ground. There's a gun. And under it, steady and enormous, a heavy machine gun was working from somewhere far off. A deep hammering boom, boom, boom that walked across the rocks and threw up fountains of grit. And every time it paused, the men in the throat tried to move. And every time they moved, it started again. Somebody up high, somebody very far away, was running the whole thing. In the operations hut, Commander Aldridge stood over the map with the net screaming in his ear, and made the calculation no commander wants to make. His quick reaction force was 40 minutes out. His men had minutes. The gun on the high ground had them ranged, and it would not stop. And there was exactly one shooter on Kestrel who might reach it, and he had spent 2 weeks letting other men keep her off the board. He closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he keyed the net. Holloway. A pause that cost him something. Get on the anvil, overwatch. Now. I should have had you up there from day one. Go. She was already moving. She and Yara took the climb to the high hide at a dead run with the long case between them, lungs burning in the thin air. And they went over the lip of the ridge, and the entire throat unrolled below them. In the morning light, 2 miles of it, smoking, alive, with muzzle flash. 8 men pinned behind a dead truck while the world tried to end them. Holloway dropped prone, and the case was open, and the rifle was on its bipod before Yara had her glass up. Not the long gun, not yet. First the closer threats. Through the scope, the near ambush resolved into shapes with purpose. Fighters in a wadi at 1,100 meters, working a flank, trying to get an angle into the truck's blind side. Competent, patient, moving in bounds, one up while one covered, the way you move when somebody trained you. Her first transmission went out flat and clean, over a net that had been nothing but panic. Kestrel Actual, this is Overwatch. I have eyes on the throat. 1,100 meters. North Wadi. 4 shooters flanking your 9 o'clock. Engaging now. No fear in it. No apology. The clinical voice of someone reading a grocery list. And in the operations hut, Aldridge looked up sharply, because that voice did not match a single thing anyone had said about her in 2 weeks. She breathed out, got still. The shot took itself. The first man dropped before the others heard the report cross the valley, because at that range the bullet beats the sound. 1. The second was turning toward his falling partner, when she shifted 4 mils and fired again. 2. The crack of her rifle rolled down the throat a full second behind the impacts, and the flankers froze, which is the thing untrained men do, and the thing that gets them killed. And she killed the third while he was deciding. 3. The fourth made it back into the wadi. She let him think he was safe for the half second it took her to range the lip of rock he'd dropped behind, and then she put around through the rock and into him. 4. Yara beside her was calling wind and impacts in a tight, fast voice, and there was a thread in it that wasn't fear exactly. It was awe, the sound a person makes watching someone do the impossible quietly. Move your cover. They're going to range you, Yara said suddenly. Her own call, nobody's order, and she was right. Holloway shifted 2 body widths, left behind a different spine of rock, half a breath before the far heavy gun found their first position. The boom, boom, boom swung off the trucks and onto the ridge, and the world came apart. Here is the part I want you to slow down for, because she nearly died in the next 10 seconds. The big rounds came in low and flat and impossibly fast, and the first one struck the rock she'd just left, and the rock simply ceased to be rock. It became a cloud, a hot spray of stone splinters and dust that hissed past her cheek like a fistful of thrown gravel. She felt the pressure change before she heard anything, a slap of compressed air against her left ear that turned the world to a high, ringing whine. Another round walked in 2 feet short and threw grit into her scope, into her open eye, into her teeth. She tasted blood and stone. The ground under her chest jumped with each impact, a deep physical thudding she felt in her sternum, in her back teeth, in the long bones of her legs. Open ground has a feeling to it, a nakedness, the certain animal knowledge that there is nothing between your spine and the thing trying to find it but luck and a few inches of dirt. She did not freeze. She counted the rhythm of the gun. 3 rounds, pause, 3 rounds, pause. And on the pause, she low-crawled 6 feet to a fold she'd marked on last night's range card, the burned truck reference line, and got behind it as the next burst chewed up the spot she'd been lying in. A splinter of rock had opened her cheek to the bone. She wiped it with the back of her glove, blinked her eye clear, and put her face back behind the gun. And that's when Brant's voice came over the net. And it did not sound like Brant. There was a silence first. 3, 4 seconds of dead air, where the loud man should have been, and you could feel him deciding. You could feel the whole weight of 2 weeks of jokes pressing down on the push-to-talk button under his thumb. When he keyed it, his breath came first, ragged, close to the mic. Then he said it, and his voice cracked on the first syllable like green wood. Overwatch? A swallow you could hear. Holloway, that gun on the high ground, it's got us cold. We can't move. We can't even get to our wounded. His voice climbed, and he hauled it back down. We need you. I need you to take that gun. Please. Please. From Wade Brant. The men pinned behind the truck heard it too, and one of them, a young one, turned and stared at the radio in another man's hand like it had spoken in a dead language. In the operations hut, Aldridge went still. 2 weeks of laughter had a single sound now, and the sound was a big man on an open net saying please to the woman he'd offered 1 bullet. Whatever Brant had believed about himself, about her, about how the world was arranged, you could hear it breaking in real time, syllable by syllable, across 2 miles of burning air. Holloway keyed back 2 words. On it. Then she ranged the high ground, and her blood went cold because the gun was on the anvil. The far ridge, the wall of rock 2.5 miles off where the wind ran in 3 directions, 3,800 meters. The number she and Yara had written in a notebook last night and laughed about. She didn't have the rifle for it on the bipod. She had it in the case. She unslung the bolt gun and reached for the long one, the TAC-50. A brute of a thing, 50 caliber, the kind of rifle that doesn't crack when it fires so much as it punches a hole in the day. The sound of it would be a different animal entirely. And she knew it. She got it onto the bipod, seated the round, the 1 round, and the engagement changed character before she even fired, because the men in the throat were still dying on a clock, and she had maybe 90 seconds before the gun finished what it had started. Yara, Anvil, talk to me. Soto was already on it, glass up, voice fast and disciplined now. Every trace of the eager kid burned off. Range 3800, confirmed, lasered twice. Wind's a mess. Full value, left to right down low, swaps to right to left mid. And the top third's doing something I can't read. It's boiling. She rattled the numbers, the drop, the spin, the come-ups. More elevation than seemed possible. The reticle's whole picture tilted into a different country. The round would be in the air, almost 6 full seconds. 6 seconds, which over open ground with men dying is not a measurement of time. It's a sentence handed down. The Earth's own rotation would push the bullet. The wind would have its way 3 separate times on the way out. And the gun on the anvil would fire 40 more rounds before her single one arrived. And then it got worse, because that's the rule of a day like this. Movement on her own ridge. A fire team of fighters, 4 men, had climbed the back of the anvil side spur and were coming up onto the high ground toward her position, 300 meters and closing, and they had seen her muzzle dust. She was nearly out of bolt gun ammo. She had the 50, loaded, committed to a 6-second shot at a target 2.5 miles away, and 4 men coming for her at a flat run, and a cut on her face dripping into her collar, and a partner whose hands were shaking on the glass. This is the hardest thing she would do that day, and she would do it in the open, exposed on 3 sides, with the clock running on everyone at once. She made the choice no instructor can teach. She left the close threat to Yara. Carbine, the 4 on the spur. Buy me 8 seconds. She didn't look up from the scope. Yara dropped the spotting glass and brought up her short rifle, and the sound of the engagement split in 2. Beneath Holloway's ear, the sharp, snapping bark of Yara's 5.56 going to work. A quick stuttering chatter, brass tinking off the rocks, completely different from the deep work that was coming. A terrier next to a thing that hadn't spoken yet. Yara fired in controlled pairs, the way Holloway had drilled into her on a dozen quiet evenings, and the lead man on the spur folded, and the second dove for cover, and the chatter held them, just held them, for the breath Holloway needed. She got still. She heard her grandfather then, plain as a kitchen window on a Sunday. His slow, flat voice right there in her skull. Stillness first. The shot takes itself. You get out of its way. She got out of its way. She built the firing solution and stopped thinking about it. The dripping cut, the men on the spur, Yara's rifle hammering inches from her head, the 8-pinned men, Brant's cracked pleas, all of it slid off her and away, and there was nothing left but the rifle and the wind and a far gray smudge on the anvil that was a man killing her friends. She let her heart beat slow between rounds of Yara's fire. She found the pause between her own pulse beats, the half-second of true stillness, and on the exhale, she pressed the trigger straight back, no flinch, no pull, the break a surprise the way it's supposed to be. The TC-50 did not crack. It detonated against the morning, a flat, enormous thunderclap that flattened the dust around the muzzle in a ring and rolled out across the whole valley, so that for one instant every other sound stopped, even the heavy gun, as if the day itself had been struck. The recoil drove the rifle into her shoulder like a horse kicking. And then the wait, the terrible 6-second wait, the bullet a small, lonely thing, arcing up out of the atmosphere and coming back down, fighting 3 winds and the spin of the planet, while she held the scope steady and watched the far gray smudge keep firing, keep firing, keep. The smudge stopped. A heartbeat later, the sound of the impact came back to them across the valley. Faint, a small far-off tick against rock. The most ordinary sound in the world, for the most impossible thing she had ever done. The heavy gun on the anvil did not fire again. The position went dark, and the particular silence of a gun that will never fire again settled over the throat. And Yara made a sound that was half a sob and half a laugh, and didn't stop firing at the spur. "Engagement," Holloway said into the net, flat. "Complete." It wasn't, quite. They cleaned up the spur. Yara had dropped 2. Holloway took the last, with the carbine at 60 meters. The close, sharp pop of it, almost gentle after the 50. And the count, when it was over, when the survivors in the throat could finally lift their heads, and the QRF was inbound, and the smoke began to drift, came to 31. 31, across a sustained engagement that had lasted under 9 minutes from her first round to the silence on the anvil. One of those rounds had traveled 3,800 meters. One round. But there was still the empty channel. And I have to tell you about that because it was the worst part of the morning. When the shooting fell off, Holloway keyed the net to check her platoon. She called for each call sign and got each one back, ragged but alive, except one. "Karis, this is Overwatch. Give me a status." Nothing. "Karis." Static. The long, indifferent hiss of an open channel with no human voice in it. She called a third time, and the silence stretched out. 3, 4, 5 seconds, and in 5 seconds of radio silence, you can bury a man. You can plan his funeral. You can hear his mother answer a phone. Yara had gone still beside her. Then a different voice came on, strained. "He's down. He's hit bad. Lower truck. We can't..." And Holloway was already off the ridge. She came down into the throat, at a run with the medical kit instead of the rifle now. And that is the thing about her you need to understand. The thing 2 weeks of laughter never once suspected. The same hands that had put 31 men in the dirt across 2.5 miles unrolled a trauma kit in the dust beside a dying boy with the exact same precision, the exact same stillness. Only now they were trying to keep a heart beating instead of stopping one. His name was Private Eli Karis. He was 20 years old. He had a younger sister getting married in the fall, and he'd been talking for a week about whether his dress uniform would still fit, and there was a photograph of a dog named Biscuit folded into his helmet band. A piece of the truck had opened his thigh, and the blood was coming in pulses, bright and arterial and far too fast, soaking black into the dust beneath him, and his face had gone the gray-white of a candle. She dropped to her knees in it. Her hands found the wound and packed it, and her thumb went into the femoral crease and pressed. And she felt the awful slick pulse of him under her thumb start to slow under the pressure. And she got the tourniquet high and tight and cranked it until the windlass bit and the pulsing stopped. "Look at me, Eli. Eyes on me." His eyes wandered and came back to her face. His lips were moving, and she leaned down to hear it. "Am I gonna die?" he whispered. He was crying, the slow leaking tears of a kid too cold and too far gone to sob. "Sergeant, am I dying? Tell me. Don't lie to me." She did not look away. She did not flinch. She put her bloody hand flat against the side of his face the way her grandfather used to put his hand on her shoulder, and she held his eyes, and her voice, when it came, was low and certain and absolutely without doubt. A fact and a promise welded into the same 2 breaths. "Not today." She pressed the IV line into the crook of his arm and taped it down without looking at it. "You hear me? Not today. Not on me. You're going to that wedding. You're going to wear that ugly uniform and dance with your sister, and I am going to be there to laugh at you. That's not a hope, Eli. That's an order." And the boy, 20 years old and white as ash, believed her, because everything in her voice gave him no other choice, and he held onto her wrist with a grip that wouldn't quit. And she let him, and she kept that hand on his face the whole long flight time until the bird came down in a hurricane of dust, and the surgeons took him out of her hands, still breathing. She kept the promise. He made the wedding. But that came later. What came first was the silence of the equipment bay. The same bay, the same crates, the same hard fluorescent light, 2 days after the throat. The men were back from the field. Nobody was laughing now. Brant came in last. He was not the same man who'd held up a bullet. Something had gone out of the way he carried himself. The shoulders that had filled doorways were rounded now, and he came toward where Holloway sat, cleaning her gear, the way a man approaches the edge of something high. He stopped a few feet off. The bay went dead quiet, every man in it watching, because they had all heard him say please on an open net, and they all knew this was coming. He tried to speak, and nothing came. He started again. "I owe you." His jaw worked. His voice, the big instrument he'd used like a weapon for years, came out small and broken into pieces. "I owe you an apology. And it's bigger than the bullet. I want you to know I know that. It was never about whether you could shoot." His hands had nowhere to go. They opened and closed at his sides. "I looked at you, and I decided what you were before you ever set down your gear. And I made the whole platoon laugh at it, and you—" He had to stop. He looked at the floor, and his eyes were wet, and he did not bother to hide it in front of his men, which, for a man like Brant, was its own kind of dying. "You went out, and you saved my life, and you saved Eli's life with a shot that shouldn't be possible, and you never once threw any of it back at me. I'm not asking you to square it. I don't think you can. I just needed to stand here and say it out loud where they could all hear me. I was wrong about you, all the way down. I was wrong." He didn't ask for forgiveness. To his credit, he never asked. Nora set down the bolt. She looked at him for a long moment, level and clear. The cut on her cheek closed now to a thin, dark line she'd carry for good. Then she gave him 2 words, and they acknowledged everything and asked for nothing, neither absolution nor revenge. Just the plain ground 2 soldiers stand on after. "We're good." That was all. He nodded like she'd handed him something he didn't deserve and couldn't put down, and he went and sat at the end of the bench, and for a while nobody said anything at all. Commander Aldridge came for her separately the next morning, and that mattered, that it was separate, that he did not let it ride on Brant's apology. He found her at the high hide where she'd taken the shot, where she'd gone to sit in the early cold and look at the anvil 2.5 miles off and think about nothing. He stood at the edge of the rock for a long time before he spoke. He looked at the anvil. He looked at the long scar in the dirt where she'd lain. Then he did something a commander almost never does. He sat down on the rock below her, deliberately, so that he was looking up at her instead of down, and he took off his cover and turned it in his hands, and you could watch him arriving at something in real time. Watch the cost of it move across his face like weather. "I read your file last night," he said finally. "All of it. The record at the course. Should have read it the day you got here. He let out a breath. I knew Brant was running his mouth. I heard it. I told myself it was just how he keeps the team tight, that it wasn't my problem to fix. He shook his head slowly. That's a lie, I told myself, so I wouldn't have to do anything. 8 of my men were almost dead in that valley because the best shooter on this outpost was on a board with her name crossed off, and I let that happen. That's not on Brant. He looked up at her at last. This is on all of us. But the man in charge, that's me, so it's on me most. He held her eyes the way she'd held Eli's. I see you, Holloway. 4 words, plain as stone, no praise in them, only recognition, soldier to soldier. The difference between being celebrated and being seen laid down in the space between them. Then he put her name at the top of the Overwatch board and left it there. And he made it an order, and nobody crossed it off again. The change in Brant wasn't in anything he said. It was in what he did. A week later, when a new SEAL came through Kestrel, young, cocky, loud in the way Brant himself used to be loud, and made a crack in the chow line about the lady sniper, the medic. What's she even doing on a team like ours? Brant didn't raise his voice. That was the whole point. The old Brant would have raised it, would have performed. This one set down his tray, slow, and turned, and the bay quieted because they knew that turn. You see that ridge? He said to the kid, pointing out the window at the anvil, 2.5 miles off, swimming in the heat. She put a round into a man's chest on that ridge from where you're standing, 1 round. Saved my whole element doing it, mine and yours both, 'cause that's the team you just walked onto. He stepped in close, and his voice dropped to something flat and final. You don't make jokes about her. You earn the right to stand next to her, same as the rest of us are still trying to. You got that? And the kid got it. And Brant picked his tray back up and went and sat down next to Holloway, on her side of the table, where he'd spent 2 weeks refusing to sit, and that was the apology that counted, the one with no words in it at all. It was Corporal Estes who said the simplest thing, the truest thing, and he said it without knowing he was closing a loop. The freckled fueler who'd watched her hands move across the rifle in 9 seconds and not understood what he was seeing. He understood now. A few of the newer arrivals were asking what really happened in the throat, the way men ask about a thing that's already turning into a legend. And Estes, topping off a generator just like the day she came in, didn't look up from the fuel line. He just said it, quiet, like it was the most obvious fact in the world. She saved all of us. He shrugged. Every one of us in that valley. That's it. That's the whole story. Then he capped the tank and walked off. And somehow, it was a better summary than any after-action report. You'd think there'd be a parade in her somewhere. There wasn't. When Yara found her later, packing the long case to rotate down to the next valley, the next Overwatch, the next quiet ridge nobody thought to put her on until they had no other choice. The younger woman asked the question the whole audience had been carrying, asked it gently, sitting on an ammo crate, watching her friend's steady hands snap the latches. Doesn't it make you angry? All of it. 2 weeks of them treating you like nothing, and you were the one who saved them. And most of them still don't really get it. Holloway thought about it honestly. She didn't perform an answer. She set the case flat and looked out at the throat one last time. At the burned truck at 1,900 meters, at the anvil beyond it. And when she spoke, It was the only thematic thing she'd say the whole story, and she said it plainly. What people see when they look at you is their limit, Yara, not yours. You don't argue with it. You just do the work. And one day, the work says everything you never bothered to. There was no triumph in it. There was something quieter and far more durable. The particular piece of a person who had been, when the whole world depended on it, exactly who she had always been. Not vindicated, not avenged, just true. She shouldered the case. She and Yara walked down off the kestrel shelf toward the next truck and the next ridge, two soldiers good at a hard thing, going to be good at it somewhere else. At the bottom of the road, Brant was waiting by the vehicle. He didn't say anything. He just put out his hand, and she took it. And the handshake lasted 1 full second longer than a handshake needs to. His big hand and her small, steady one. And in that extra second was everything. The bullet, the bay, the laughter, the pleas on the open net, the man he used to be, and the one he was learning to become. Then she let go, climbed up into the truck, and looked out at the road ahead with level eyes and a calm that nothing in this world had been able to shake, because she had never once needed them to believe her. She'd only ever needed one round, and she'd never needed more than that.